Here.
So we'll call the meeting to order.
Before we get started, I would like to request that we do a moment of silence. I'm sure that most of you are aware of a great friend and mentor of mine, and I'm sure to many of you as well. He's been a mainstay of the North Country Regional EM in like 2003. We started the BLS core content almost 10 years ago. When we get our conference evaluations back, he's the most requested speaker that we have. And I'm very sad to announce that Rich Beebe passed away last night from complications from a motorcycle accident. So if we could do a moment of silence for Rich. Thank you. Our thoughts and prayers go out to his family and to all those who were close to him. So
I have a card here, folks, that I'll pass around, and feel free to put a note on. And once we have an address, I'll make sure that it goes out this week.
Okay, you all should have received April 4th meeting minutes by email. Any comments, concerns, changes? If not, a motion, please.
I'd make a motion to accept them as sent out.
Okay, David, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, correspondence? Oh, I'm sorry, you wanted to do that. Yes. Ian and Debbie think that it would be appropriate to do a around-the-table announcement since we have some new members here. Introduce yourselves, please.
First, can we start with if you want to introduce
Sure.
Mike?
Hi, John Morrissey, New York State Department of Health. Mike Bagosi. Michael is the new replacement person who's the Senior Emergency Medical Care Representative who will be working out of my office. It's only a couple years here since Ray is retired, and here we go. And Mike brings a whole bunch of neat strengths to the table for us. He's a CIC, he's a paramedic, and all that good stuff. And we'll be looking forward to Mike working with everybody. And anything else you'd like to say or share?
Did it well, thank you.
Yeah. Mike's worked both in-state and out-of-state. He worked at John Hopkins and a couple other places along the way and doing EMS, and so brings some good in-state, out-of-state sort of variety, so that'll be kind of cool to have all that. So
I do have a question.
Sure.
After that. Contact information, email, and will the phone numbers be what Ray's were?
Same desk phone number as Ray had, which is 477. Oh, look it up. I remember. Now I haven't dialed it in so long. Now it's the last are 86, but I think it's
8491.
8491. Yeah, okay, that sounds right. He has not gotten an official cell phone yet, but we will. Why don't you give out your email address?
It's Michael.Bagozzi, that's BAGOZZI at health.newyork.gov.
And we'll be, Michael in the next few months is going to be heavily involved in a lot of training events and so forth, because it takes a few months to get up to speed with all the different functions of what you have to do and not do and all that stuff. But you will be seeing Michael versus my smiling face at a lot of meetings and so forth, which I know you guys get sick of looking at me all the time, so it'll be good to have a change his pace. Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
Do you guys want to go around and introduce yourselves?
Sure. Steve Monett, Lewis County EMS Deputy Coordinator, past Krogan, and now Lewis County Search and Rescue, BLS provider.
Justin Astfan, Chief of Operations, Lewis County Search and Rescue.
Joe Bova, Deputy Director, Jefferson County 911.
Bob McKenzie, Director of Fire and Emergency Management, EMS, Lewis County.
Justin McKinnon, Emergency Medicine at Ken Potsdam.
Maya Gray, Emergency Medicine at Samaritan.
David Sherman, President, CEO, Seaway Valley Ambulance, Messina.
Jim Devers, instructor, paramedic. Semi-retired.
Are you done?
Yes.
I was going to say, you figured you work harder now than when you were really working before retirement. True?
Yes.
Come on, speaker.
I'm Debbie Fultz, Jefferson County EMS.
Debbie Singleton, Chair of REMSCO and South Jeff Rescue Squad.
Sarah Delaney, emergency medicine physician at Samaritan.
Ann Smith, North Country EMS Program Agency Director.
Joe Doss, Portland Regional Health and Organization.
Jim Mark, Hospital Rescue.
Mark Newman,
All right,
And
thank
we
you.
have Kobe Brooks on the phone momentarily. He's a representative with Air Methods.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the correspondence, DOH enforcement list.
Here.
Michael Helbron Rada, suspended for 1 year effective 3/30/16, suspension stayed, civil penalty 2,000, 1750 suspended, violations 800.16A7. Christopher Jenkins, suspended 3 months effective 3/30/16, suspension stayed, placed on probation 3 years 3/30/16, civil penalty $2,000, 1,500 suspended, allowed to recertify at BLS only, violations 800.16C. Joseph Smegleski, suspended 1 year, suspension stayed for 3 years effective 3/14/16, civil penalty $2,000, violations 800.1610. We do have some correspondence. SUNY Canton is requesting our endorsement of BLS FR agency code.
And just for your information, the St. Lawrence County EMS Advisory Board received the same letter, and they endorsed them to bring that letter to the region.
Okay, so moving on to old business, Air Medical. Ken's not here.
Air Medical, the only report that I have is I received an invite to a news conference on June 13th at 10 a.m. From Mercy Flight, and that they'll be opening a new permanent base location at Griffiths. This can have some effect on Lewis County, so I'm not sure if you guys were aware of that. I just got it in my email. I'm not sure, Bob, if they've talked to you at all, if they're going to be there all the time, or if it's just for the summer again, I don't know.
Mercy Flight?
Yeah.
As far as I know, it's limited schedule, but it's going to be for the balance of the summer.
Okay.
That's all I know about it. I do know that they were attempting to get down there. Kind of hard to get a hold of, so...
Can you make sure you're
using your mic?
Using your mics, because it's going to be very hard to can't hear.
So,
Okay.
that's about as much as I know.
Kobe is on the phone with us from Air Methods. Does he have anything to report? Can you hear me, Kobe?
Yes, just trying to get off you. I don't have anything major to report right now. I will have data and information that you typically request. Once I arrive, I'm not just a few minutes behind, but I'll be there for the next meeting and I can provide you with that data.
All right, thanks, Kobe.
Yep.
Okay, state EMS meetings. Jim?
You should have received it by email. Also, you should have the Bureau of EMS Systems, the EMS operational section, a handout from that, and the Part 800.22 revisions that is a copy of that. The big thing at the state council meeting, I'm just going to highlight some of the important stuff, since you have copies. The nice thing was at the EMS Memorial this year, we had more ambulance agencies than ever represented. And those of us that own the career committee and worked hard to get that memorial established, that was very positive that we were getting together as brothers and sisters and recognize those that died in the line of duty. Already they have 3 for the memorial next year. Also, it was brought up that we need to remind agencies when they do inter-facility transfers and emergencies to be sure to drop off a copy of the PCR or a drop form. That's still having a problem with that at the state level. Another thing is the director, Lee Burns, is going to be meeting with some important people to discuss the Medicaid reimbursement rates that's supposed to be coming. They're supposed to have several meetings because the reimbursement is causing a lot of financial hardships for a lot of the EMS agencies. Another thing, just more of an awareness thing, is this paramedicine program that we went through all the problems to change regulations to allow paramedics to participate. They're having some problems with some home health care systems and public health fighting the reimbursement of EMS to provide those services. They're going to try to get all of the players together and work this thing out, and hopefully they don't realize that we're a threat, we're just supplementing this system. As far as training and that goes, the big thing finally also came out in the protocol is they took away mask pants. It's out of the protocol, BLS, ALS, everything. Also, they changed, they took out of the BLS protocol hyperventilation for head trauma patients. They'll be doing that, yeah, but it looks like that's going to be coming out. Let's see, the peer committee, just for information, the reason there was kind of a lag this year because we had to change the submission dates because we're trying to align ourselves with national, and national changed their dates. So next year there will not be a late submission when you submit the awards. I'm giving the pass rates because I think this is important because we've done a lot of transition, new testing at the state level. The CFRs, there was 1,419 that tested, there was a 92% pass rate. Basic EMTs, 3,560, there was 89% pass rate. AET, 37, took the exam, 79% pass rate. Critical care was 54, tested, 95% pass rate. And paramedic, 558, tested with an 88.6 pass rate. And that was the default test date, which is a high test date. There is discussion on the critical care program. We have a tag, both Debbie and I are on the tag with a couple others from state training and ed to look at the future of critical care, how to look at the curriculum and bring it up to date. The last time critical care was updated was around 1995 is the best I can figure for my paperwork.
I'm on the medical standards.
Yeah. And so we have good representation, and the people on that committee, I think, have been around a long time, are familiar with the critical care program, but it needs updating.
Just so you know, it was last updated in 2001. It just went into effect just prior to 9/11.
Yeah.
The reason I know that is I helped write that.
Yeah, I know. I know 95 was a major revision. Then they had another one, but
Yeah. 95 was the last. That was pretty big too. But anyway, just the current curriculum.
That's good.
Yeah.
Need to bring it up. What you have on the safety committee, Just a report on that. We did the 800 revisions, and I gave you a part 800.22, which is endless constructions. I gave you the copy of the draft that was passed. What it's got to go to is medical, it's got to go to legal affairs and actually write the legislation. But that's a copy of what is going to happen when you buy an ambulance in the future. Also, we'll be working on the policy statement for red lights and sirens. We'll give you a draft of that. That's 7 pages long, and we want to narrow it down a little bit. So, the rest of it, I think the big thing on safety, we need to make sure enough that safety is just not when you arrive at the scene, it's when you leave the building and you get back in the building and your safe practices in the building. Don't get yourself hurt working in the building. So we need to think about safety as an occupation from the time you get to work until the time you leave for work. And make that a focus so we don't have hurt long-term EMS providers with disabilities.
Jim, was that part 822 draft, did you get that out as a copy here tonight?
Yeah, I handed it out.
Oh, can you make,
I can give you one. You were,
we just got to make sure Kurt has a copy to get in the minutes.
did I give you a copy first? I'll get you a copy. That's one. Take her to the other one.
It's that right there.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Jim?
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to reiterate something. Jim had brought up that Director Burns had mentioned about the looking into Medicaid reimbursement. A survey went out, and I just want to bring it up, that it gets, anybody in the region, if you got that survey and if you have not filled it out and submitted it, please do so. It's critical in getting assistance and getting the Medicaid rates up, reimbursement rates up. Because agencies are saying that Medicaid is paying significantly below the cost of doing the call, and DOH is trying to assist us with this, and they want us to show them how. So it's not really asking for anything that's really specific. It's a simple formula. So if you didn't get that email, it came out from Richard Brandt. And I have a copy of it I can forward to you if you need it.
I think when we get information and surveys from the Department of Health, we should be proactive in the system, because they have a lot stronger voice than we do, and they will move it up for us.
Just for the record, I've gotten a few phone calls about the concern about the data, and I have multiple assurances that it will be aggregate data, no individual data. That is, I believe that's well premised in the email as I remember it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I just say that again. There's a lot of people, I won't say, there was a concern of, like any time you give up the sensitive data, in the competitive marketplace, people get a little nervous, right? A better way to say that. But again, there is absolutely no intent to only aggregate data. This will never be singled out to single services or any of that stuff. But just need to just say that for the record, just because that has been an issue.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Any other comments? Okay, Spring Fling, Debbie and Ann?
I'll cover that in my program agency report.
Okay, we'll just move that to that, okay. EKG transmission, Joe and Ann.
State is on board. St. Joe's has their secure email. It just has not been provided or publicly put out. I believe they're working on their policy yet. Last week, my IT guy gave me 5 more Surface Pros for Carthage, Cape Vincent, and Henderson to distribute. And I figured I was going to test it before I sent them back out. And when I turned them on, a program that is encryption called Bitdefender wouldn't work properly. So I had to give them back to him. He's a little perplexed by what the problem is with that. he's new to this. This is not Tom Zachary doing it. This is a Fort Drum Regional Health Planning employee. And this same gentleman, Elliot Reckland, is going to Guilford to work with Bruce and their staff tomorrow at 1 o'clock to figure out that same problem. So I have a couple things. Guilford is close to hopefully coming on board and getting it to Carthage, Henderson, Cape Vincent, and then our next is Indian River and Evans Mills here in Jefferson County. Dave, I know you're anxious for yours. Justin, I know you're anxious down, and we're going to roll them out as quick as we can. But programming these is quite lengthy, and what our staff is doing is making a key so that it can, what's been taking 2 to 4 hours per device can hopefully be done in 30 minutes. But he has to make sure it's perfect before he rolls that out. And as we found out last week, we were not quite there. So it's coming, and I apologize that it's so slow, but the process is there. It works. We do have to reach out to St. Joe's and say, thank you for letting us know you have it. Please give it to us so that we can use it.
And then we'll be working with Lewis County General, Carthage, and River Hospital, and then we'll be rolling into St. Lawrence County, which has 5 hospitals to try and get this set up, and it's taken us months to get it set up in one and almost another.
But I believe that was the goal for getting Jefferson set up first, was so that we could get the bugs worked out before we tried to expand it out. So
we saw bugs.
It's better to do it right the first time and take a little longer, and then move it out.
Any comments, questions?
We tested it a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
South Jeff, we took a picture.
South
printed
Jeff.
an EKG, took a picture and sent it in. And
Black River.
Thank you.
So that-
I knew there were 3. and
So
they-
that all-
Town is on board. Town of Watertown is
Did they, I'm trying to think if they,
tested a few, but there's
which agency is Tom with? I thought he's with Black River, so I think Watertown may have tested because he said he could work on Black River himself. Or maybe, I thought there were 3 that, regardless, we have a process that is working, at least from on our end. So we're moving forward. I know it may seem slow, but we are making progress. Okay, Jim, RSI.
Give you a status report. We have come up with a draft, and Dr. Maynard, he doesn't know it yet, but Mark Evers and Dr. Delaney and I are going to get together and move forward with this.
Never too late to keep up.
I know, right?
What happens when you show up late for a meeting? All right, Dave, Protocol Review Committee.
At this point, we have received some comments back from the protocols that were sent out, but we'd also like to point out that at the state council meeting last week, 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Sorry. The protocols were approved to move forward for the Remo region, and we are on it as how many regions now does that make on that? 11?
It's like 11.
I think it's 11 regions on that set of protocols now. And so we are on it, taking consideration the comments. The big thing is with this program, it's going to be a group rollout. We aren't going to have to write it ourselves, but we're all going to use the same rollout, and we're anticipating a January 1 effective date for this. So watch for what's going to be coming down the road. Watch your emails for drugs to be not purchasing large amounts of, because they will be coming off your protocols. So, any questions, obviously, get a hold of us through program agency or contact me. We'll work on it.
This has been a goal of the state council to do this for 15 years, and we're almost there statewide. We probably won't get New York City and Long Island, but this is quite an accomplishment. Wouldn't you say, John?
Yeah, considering you have 17 councils, 17 different councils statewide, you're at 11.
We've got 11 now.
Yeah, that's pretty darn good. And it makes everybody's lives easier for a variety of things. in time of mutual aid disasters to, just common, everybody's, if you come from another area, you come from another part of the state that's using the same protocols you're used to, and you relocate, your life's a lot easier. You're not like walking in having to relearn a whole set. So it's a good move. It really is.
Okay, thank you. Albuterol blood glucometry policy statement update. Debbie?
Jim Howard and myself met. We went through the albuterol training and the blood glucometry training. We reviewed everything, the policies, the protocols, the agreements, the tests, the exams, the practical skills, and the PowerPoint presentations. Once we made all our changes on that and our recommendations, I met with Ann and we sat down and we went through, and she got that all on her computer. And the only thing we have left to do is we just have to tweak the albuterol PowerPoints.
Blood glucometry. Blood glucometry.
I mean, what did I say?
Albuterol.
Oh, I mean the blood glucometry PowerPoints. Once she does that, then she'll send all that out for review, and then we can go on it next meeting.
Thank you, Debbie.
Perfect.
Provider credentialing manual. Ann?
All right, with moving forward to the online system, it caused the need for a lot of changes for our credentialing manual. And as I was going through it, I caught a few other things that we needed to update. The manual was sent out. I did receive a few comments back, which I need to review. But the basis of this was to identify the new correct reporting process for CMEs and get it out there. I mean, we've been sending emails out, but we don't really have the document needs to be updated for providers to reference. I will tell you, our CMEs, as we discussed previously, become a problem, and if I don't have something to back it up in writing, it is absolutely amazing how many ways people find to get around doing their CMEs in a timely fashion. So the general preference was it was updated to meet the new online reporting requirements. The addition of charging a fee for those who lapse and get suspended that we voted on last time, twice in a 3-year period, was added in there. EMT was updated, or EMTI was updated to AEMT. So some of those little changes, there was additional, under the conferences, I added in the regional conferences that we didn't have in there, but as far as the education part of it, the hours, none of that changed. Just mostly the reporting process. I just kind of threw it, oh no, I didn't throw it up there on the screen. But everybody received that via email, so I'm looking to entertain a motion to approve that with the, Debbie, I think most of your changes were punctuation type in effect, weren't they?
Well, I had a big one there under section 9, page 9. I thought we should add something about putting a comment there that billing agencies cannot submit to CMS for reimbursement providers who are suspended within the region from performing ALS skills. If you have somebody suspended in the region and they perform ALS skills, you can't bill for that. And we need to make sure that agencies understand that. That's a huge part of the compliance, and I had suggested we add that in.
I make a recommendation, changes that Debbie recommends that we approve this.
Okay, I also had one other question before we move forward, and that's not coming up on my screen. One of the things that we have previously always required is photo identification. And with the new online system, it requires them to submit a CPR card, but not any type of photo identification. it's not something that we've ever looked at too often, although sometimes it's nice to go in and, say, okay, I got to meet with this person, what do they look like for me, but that's just personal. Can we remove that from the book? Our regions that we're online with this system are not collecting photo identifications that I'm aware of.
Does anybody have a reason to believe you need to have a photo ID in the program agency?
And that's why I asked, because is there something I'm not aware of from way back when that required that? Because that was in place when I came up here.
Let me offer that identity theft and identity fraud in these matters, the more identification you can have as to who's the what to relate to, it probably makes some sense. We haven't had any recently, but in the past we've had some people showing up to take written exams that weren't necessarily who they were said they were. I would offer, as you follow accreditation and so forth around the country, many states are moving toward fingerprinting EMS workers. Just like nurses, newer nurses in this state are now required. You're a new graduate nurse, you have to do fingerprinting. I'm not suggesting we get to that level. And frankly, the reason that statewide it hasn't occurred is a lot of money to do it, okay? To run the prints and do all that stuff is the only reason it hasn't happened. But potentially having a photo who's submitted, you know what I'm trying to say, and having some valid ID, photo of them may make some sense.
And the agencies collect that? I'm right? There's no agency that doesn't get a photo ID of their, or at least
I would say that most agencies do collect that type of data and do put it inside individuals' personnel records.
Correct.
I can tell you that any fire-based EMS agency, they're getting the same sex offender registry, background checks, et cetera, which I would recommend that strongly to any EMS agency right across the boards. I'm not even sure that there's a mandate for that out there yet.
But the region, I don't know if we necessarily need the photo ID because we rely on that agency. My communications is with that agency director and or CME manager, the leadership of that agency. So hopefully, they have all of that.
Do all agencies collect that?
I will tell you, I look at a lot of personnel files. And I will tell you it's hit and miss and more miss than hit.
Guess the answer should be they're supposed to collect it.
Well, now remember, I only look for what the department does not require an 830. Can I point that out? There is no 830 requirement to collect photo IDs of people. The code wasn't written in the day in need for photo IDs. I'm just pointing out, if I may, because I'm the guy who looks at a lot of these training personnel records, it's rare I find photos. I'll just point that out to you. It's rare.
I think having those in the file, then we've got to make sure that we've got the most current one and all that. I think it's more work than it's worth. You're not going to just go meet with John Smith. The agency's going to know, and they're going to say, I'm sorry, but that's not John Smith.
And I'm good with that. And by the way, I'm just explaining to you just so you understand the lay of the land. I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just saying, if you think that they're at the agency level, I would offer you go audit. You're not going to find many with photos. I mean, yes, some larger services like Guilfoyle I think does, but a lot of services I look at do not routinely have them.
Insurance companies may require them for their drive.
Different issue.
Yeah.
But not a code. It's not codified.
Right.
And I believe ESEP, if Mike White was sitting here, I don't believe he requires that.
They do not.
They do not. Right.
Have not.
Right. Have not, as far as I'm aware. So,
and if you do the lens program, there's no picture there. You just.
Well, that's my point.
The record.
What you think would be there isn't. That's all I'm trying to say.
So, I mean, at a regional level, it's not something that I have ever really accessed much in the last 10 years, so.
That probably speaks enough.
I would ask that we remove that, and if such a time comes, because we haven't been collecting it since I've been back on the online system.
I'll make a motion to scratch it.
Okay.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
So we had the other motion went through with the approval, right?
So for the physician,
With the
provider
changes
credentialing manual.
that Debbie had?
Provider.
I don't think we voted. You had a
On what?
motion and a seconded, and then we went into your question about photo ID.
Sorry, I messed that up. So there was a motion on the floor from Jim, am I correct?
That's correct.
Made a motion to approve the provider credentialing manual with the changes Debbie submitted.
Yes.
Dave seconded, I believe.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Do we have anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Scratch Rate Medical Director Notification Committee.
no report.
Other old business. Does anyone else have any other old business they'd like to bring forward? Okay, moving on to Program Agency Report.
Okay, so I thought I had that up on the screen. I gotta find it on my computer. Okay. All right, so just in case any of you did not know, we actually moved. We're in the same building, but we moved to Suite 200. So instead of moving on up, we moved on down. It's a little smaller office, but it's a much nicer office. So hopefully if you come see us this summer, you will not swelter as you did last summer. We completed our third quarter report. It was a little bit late due to the conference. I'd received an extension from the state, but it was in by the end of the first week following our 30-day period. We did receive our payment for the third quarter, so we are now in the final quarter, which ends June 30th. We completed the regional training template with the assistance from our course sponsors. I threw it up there on the screen. I don't know if you can see it. It's not the greatest picture, but just kind of gives you an idea of the number of students that we put out in 2015. And if anybody wants to look at this a little bit closer, I'm happy to share it with them. But the numbers for the projected training were given to me via the each one of our course sponsors in the region. So we had no public access to fibrillation epi-albuterol applications that came through since our last meeting. There are 2 BLS CPAP applications, Carthage Area Rescue and Star Lake Fire Rescue. I would entertain a motion to approve their endorsement of that.
Make motion.
Motion by,
Second.
go ahead, Maya. And Dave seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
So I also completed a quarterly report for the state on uses of Narcan. And I didn't bring the report with me, but really there wasn't that many. And I know that's not true. I know that there's a lot more uses of that going on than what our documentation is reflecting. So please take back to your agency to make sure with your electronic documentation that you're capturing that data in the appropriate spots. For example, I know in EMS charts, if you just document it in the comments, it probably won't pick up when that information is sent to the image trend, the bridge for the state, if it's not put under a medication. And that's what I've been seeing has been happening in some instances with that reporting system. I'm not as familiar with the other electronic reporting systems, so you can take a minute and look and see if that's one of the, medication use should be one of the fields that goes into the bridge, and how your folks are documenting it. I think that's a huge importance for the region as we move forward. So, just you can watch the news and know that it was given a whole lot more often, or listen to the providers talking. But there were very few uses. I think when we have Lewis County, there was a couple. Jefferson County had some, but nowhere near the number that I've heard, in other meetings, so.
Are you getting the reports from the fire departments and the police agencies that are using
Well, let me
it?
tell you how I had to get this information. Electronic documentation we were able to pull from our 24 agencies. We pulled from the state bridge. We had to go through every single paper PCR and look for documentation of Narcan. Every single paper PCR for the quarter. And not everybody's always, so if you're using paper PCR, also make sure that you hit the medication administered. We found a couple that weren't there. We found a couple where they didn't document under where the medications go. It was just documented in the comments. We just happened to catch those. So, again, one of the challenges that I report to the state on every quarterly report that I do is because we have we have less than half of our agencies on electronic platforms. Pulling data is a nightmare. Tracking anything, researching anything, it's an absolute nightmare. I had Joe, Kurt, and I all going through PCRs, and Kurt does it regularly when he goes through them, but
The question I asked was, are you getting the information from your fire department and police, first responders who are giving it? Because we're getting multiple times where I'm hearing from our crews, they show up and police have already administered Narcan. So you're going to see a decline in EMS usage because most of your police agencies and your fire department first responders who may not be turning in PCRs because they don't have to are administering Narcan. And
yes, I am getting those reports, sorry.
All right.
But again, I have those reports.
Because you're right, there's an increase in Narcan usage.
But I mean, it was like less than, I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was only like 10 uses.
I had 3 at the same house within 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I know it's much greater than that in the county.
Yeah.
And again, the only reports that we get them from are the ones we provide them, the Narcan.
Well, that's the reason I brought it up.
No, but, like the city PD, the sheriff, and town of Watertown Fire Department are the ones that we get the reports from, and they're pretty good about giving us reports.
Good.
They actually have to give them to get more Narcan.
Smart move. Hey, we'll fill out the reports if you give us Narcan.
I'll give you Narcan.
Cool. It's $39 a dose right now.
Just got to sign the paper. Okay.
Everybody heard that, right?
Anyway, we haven't had any new applications for Narcan. ALS inspections. At the last meeting I reported we did an ALS inspection on Cape Vincent. We're awaiting their plan of correction. They have somebody new that is now overseeing EMS, Roger Dowling. So they're working on correcting some of the issues, but as I reported overall, they just had a few expired things. My bigger concern with them was the lack of PCRs. They weren't sending in their PCRs in a timely manner, so hopefully that will be corrected. We did get the backlog of PCRs that we needed from them. Upcoming inspection, South Jefferson, Debbie, I'm going to need to reschedule that for tomorrow. Norfolk, Harrisville, Star Lake, Beaver Falls, and Lyons Falls are all scheduled to be done in June. As I get older, I am now a fair weather inspector. I only go out when it's warm. So I will get them done this summer. Agencies without narcotics, this hasn't changed. This is the same as I reported at the last meeting. The same with our EPCR agencies. This hasn't changed. We haven't had anybody new come on. This is the same as I reported last meeting. Lewis County, Krogan did surrender their CON. So we now have 8 transport agencies, and the BLSFR that I had in the records, Bob told me to remove because they weren't Casterland. They didn't receive an agency code and they weren't responding. So I did leave the data up there for Lewis because that changed. The other 2 counties I reported on last time. Spring Fling, we had another successful year. Our attendance was down a little. I think it was because we actually hit on the spring break week, which is the first time that I remember it ever hitting there. My understanding is that the schools decided, in some counties and not in others, because St. Lawrence County was different, to take their spring break after the state testing. So, but overall, I think it was good. Everything seemed to go well. We had, a lot of positive comments from it. So, Debbie, do you have anything to add?
We did send out the survey that we did at the Remsco booth. So if you have any questions on that, it was to do with, critical stress, and have you ever considered suicide and things, because that's such a big area. So if you have any questions, we'll probably work on this a little bit more and see if there's more that we need to do in our region based on that, but that did go out to everybody, so.
Spring Fling next year, it will be same place, the last weekend in April. The Remsco and REMAC folks that did come and help us, thank you so much. I thought we had a great showing, and it was greatly appreciated. The new system that we use for certificates seemed to work very smoothly. I haven't heard any complaints. We've only had a few phone calls of folks that had some technical difficulties, but that was a tremendous help to our office and to tracking people. It was well worth the money that we spent on that.
I would agree with that. Just that one CPAP, you had 50 people in that.
Yeah, so it's a great system. I would recommend it to anybody. So. Upcoming trainings, I'll be doing a Narcan training for Colton Pierpont Fire Department. Colton and Pierpont will be there as well. This week, unfortunately, because I was out of the office, usually I open these up to the region. I didn't get a notice sent out. But anybody's welcome to come that would like to. I've had a request for a PCR and a BLS CPAP training for Star Lake. I forgot to put that in there. We're working on scheduling that, and the same with Morristown Fire Department asked for a Narcan training. We're in the process of scheduling that. The Excellence in EMS multidisciplinary call in Lewis County that we approved last time, but we made the certificates, or I shouldn't say we, Kurt made the certificates. Bob, did you have a chance to give those out? The certificates at the first responder dinner?
Yes.
Unfortunately, I couldn't attend the dinner when it was scheduled, but Bob presented them on behalf of the region. Thank you, Bob, for doing that. Medical director changes, excuse me. Madrid Rescue, Dr. Tulloch is retiring, and they have a request for Dr. Heiss, and have sent in the paperwork for her to become their medical director. I would entertain a motion to approve that.
Motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And that is the program agency report. Any questions for the program agency?
And you said you were doing a Narcan training, Colton Pierpont. People could come, but you didn't say when it is.
6/9 at
6/9?
Yep.
7 o'clock? 6 o'clock?
I don't know. I'll tell you in a second. 6:30, right in between.
Any other questions or
Thank
comments
you.
for Ann? When I announced the SUNY Canton request for endorsement, I was remiss in obtaining, apparently this has to be a motion.
We need a motion of to endorse
That we
them.
endorse their request for BLS-FR agency code. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, moving on to new business. Do we have something new for 12 lead acquisition?
Sorry, I actually,
All right, 12 lead acquisition.
That's the policy 1601, the new policy that came out. That was
Yeah, I
sent
have
out to
that up
everybody.
here.
saying that basic EMTs and AEMTs could do that. If it's something that the region wants to do, Paul Barter has graciously agreed to put together the training program for us to allow this to happen. So that was this was sent out to everybody. I don't know if people reviewed it or not.
So basically what we're going to need is that something that we want to move forward with working on a program? We'd have to do a program, the training program, the letters that they have to do, all of that. The big kicker to this is the agency has to be able to transmit the 12 lead. As you know, there's a lot of folks that are going to go, yes, we can, do this, but, that agency has to be able to transmit it in order for them to do it.
Can you, I did not review it. I don't remember seeing that. So is this in particular to chest pain patients and rule out STEMI? And so now you're asking if basics can perform the 12 lead?
Not interpret it, perform it, and send it to you to review. No interpretation, but just
It is transmitted to the hospital, and the hospital makes the determination of whether they will extend the center except for the ALS.
So I guess, why would they be going to that call in the first place?
Well, because they may not have ALS available. In some areas, and they may be BLS only, especially in St. Lawrence County, even though they've attempted to obtain ALS.
It's fair to say that this came out of a long-standing desire out of CMAC, dating back probably 4 or 5 years ago, where they wanted to require 12 leads on every ambulance in the state. That didn't happen, and this became, if you will, the supplemental position to where we are today. I think it's, again, in the North Country, staffing is an issue, and you can go one ambulance call and have a paramedic, the next ambulance call, it's crew to the basic EMT. There's no interpretive skills in this. It's more around lead placement. It's, if you will, it's more around what an EKG technician would get in a hospital. Lead placement, how to acquire, make sure it looks semi-clean, but the ability to send it. You got to understand too that Physio and I believe there's two, Zoll and I think Phillips all have 12 lead units now marketed for basic EMTs to send and do this stuff. And again, it's early recognition, all that sort of stuff. And that's why that's in place.
They had a tag on that. All the ingredients was quite successful with the basic crews and what they did. When the ER doctor read it, they said, go to a STEMI center, particularly with the long transport times. I think it's beneficial for the rural areas. And the state council was very forward-thinking on that.
How do they do that? So Jim, what do they then intercept?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Then okay, let's say logistically someone is in southern Lewis County as a basic EMT.
Yeah.
And let's just play that scenario for a second. They're a basic EMT, they put it on, STEMI criteria is met. You get transmitted to your area and you say, yep, definitely looks like a STEMI. And they may say, well, we're not going to come, we're going to go where there's CAS services. So we're closer to Utica than coming to Watertown, and we're going to go directly there. And hopefully, I would think part of the training you would be looking for is to get some level of an intercept on the way down to going to there to make that work. Now again, you'd be surprised sometimes that ambulances aren't available, because I ride with a service that does the intercepts on 81 often, not many lately, but sometimes it takes them quite a ways down before you get to meet up with somebody, because everybody's busy sometimes. But
And that's my concern.
But the bigger thing that they're looking is getting the patient going to the right direction
earlier on.
And that's my understanding.
But
I have a question on that. And so that sounds good if you can meet ALS, but if it's a chest pain call and you have a BLS agency, they usually won't they ask for ALS to be okay? So let's say no ALS available. So this BLS agency is hooking up the 12 lead. They're transmitting it to Samaritan, and it is a STEMI, and they may not be able to intercept. That patient should be going to Samaritan.
Closest facility.
The closest Because they can't treat, right? And so is that what you're worried about, that they just continue on to, let's say, Syracuse?
Well, again, there'll be, the hope of this is there's going to be medical control where the physician who gets it is going to make the determination as to what's the right move to be made for the patient.
I would recommend this. We're in the process of trying to get our ALS agencies to have the capability of transmitting 12 leads. I would strongly recommend that we do nothing with BLS 12 leads until we can flawlessly, well, maybe that's a big word, until we can, for the most of the time, transmit our 12 leads, at which point we have a system in place that's fluently working. Now we can go the next step of opening it up to BLS, and I believe we should table this until that time.
I'll chime in on this just a little bit, and I promise I'll be quiet after this. We're creating our own headaches here. I work in the mid-state system. Anybody who has a cell phone, the capabilities to take a picture, can transmit that 12-lead EKG to either St. Elizabeth's, St. Luke's. It doesn't matter across the board. All of this is being created by the HIPAA. Everybody's worried about that there's a violation here. There's no name on the 12-lead. All that there is a age on the 12-lead and a sex. That's it, nothing else. It would take an awful lot of knowledge about that particular call to know where that came from, who it's from, in order to make a violation here. So in the mid-state system, yeah, basic 12-lead EKGs would work outstanding. But because of the complications up here with various hospitals and they're not wanting to violate anything, it's become problematic. So I would say that if they have a BLS acquisition tool out there, such as Zoll, etc., that can transmit direct, and if they want to open up that, then once again, though, without the email addresses working appropriately, we're going to continue to have these problems.
So Dave, was that a motion that you made?
Yes.
I would second it.
Further discussion? All right, so I guess the motion is to essentially postpone BLS acquisition until we've worked out our current processes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay. REMAC size.
One of the things that we discussed, I think previously we may have mentioned it at a meeting, but we have never had any real policies or procedures in place for the REMAC, specifically for who came on to the REMAC, because frankly, we didn't have people beating down the doors to get here. So I'm very proud and pleased to announce that our REMAC almost outnumbers our REMSCO, which is not appropriate for a committee to, a subcommittee to have more people on it than the committee itself. Again, sometimes it makes it difficult for, getting work done and moving forward, etc. So, and many of the members that are on the REMAC as well are members of the REMSCO. So we are looking, and just to let you know, we are looking at some different ways to kind of streamline some processes, streamline some of the committee work, etc. And we talked about it with the CQI process. This all kind of falls into play. So in the near future, we will have a plan to give to you for consideration. So anybody's thoughts or input are welcome. Please let myself, Debbie, or Dr. Delaney know what your thoughts are on this.
Originally, when we went to the central New York system, there was X number from each county as far as providers and physicians, and it was a lot smaller committee.
Just as you know, as committees grow larger, sometimes it becomes more difficult to get things done. So we are looking at that. So we're open for any comments, suggestions. thoughts that you folks may have as we move forward on some of the planning with this. We're also looking at other regions and how they operate and what they have for their committees as well.
Do you have like a bylaws that you follow that's already in existence, or rules and regs?
We had a very hard time. We found one region that had REMAC bylaws. Most of the rest of them are working on standard operating guidelines. Central New York, I know, is working on some standard operating guidelines for their REMAC as well. So this is not unique to us, but we do have to pull a little more structure into the REMAC than I believe that we've had in the past.
And John, in any kind of code or law, there's
No code. It says it's a subcommittee of the regional council. That's about all Article 30 says. It talks about the powers of the REMAC in terms of, that. But in terms of it, and it does talk about it, it's a mixture of physicians, general public, and so forth. It is not just a physician-driven panel. Beyond that, it's really up to the bylaws of the hosting regional council to figure out what it, like any other committee, it's a standing committee, okay? You would create a set of parameters for membership and so forth. I think a couple of things here. One is we've got to start looking at term limits or some people get on these forever and ever and there's not been change. And I will tell you, we had a complaint with one of my councils which resulted in some major restructuring of their bylaws related to term limits, as an example. They weren't following their own rules. And frankly, other people were trying to get on and kept blocked by the, if you will, the inner structure that was there, okay, from getting new membership on, which was an issue. I think there are other issues in terms of, and the two other big topics that come up are, we don't have much general public. We don't have consumers. That's part of the ones that are specifically mentioned in the code. To have someone, Joe, from the senior citizens group who isn't an EMSer, but just they use ambulances. Or, and that's another one. And then the other is obviously minorities, which was another big push a few years ago at State Council, and minorities and have not always been well represented by the community standard of where they're coming from, and that's been another one. So these are things that have been out there for a while. This is not new, okay? But like anything, you're right. When the committee is larger than the council, that's an issue. And it's something to think about.
So we appreciate any of your thoughts or ideas as we move forward with looking at this.
Okay. CME evaluators.
So, we really need to also put in a process. Our list for CME evaluators, when I came back into the office, I did not repost. Some of these folks are suspended in the region that are on that list, so it needs to be updated, but I think we also have to look at term limits or recredentialing of CME evaluators. For me, it's just, if they're a CIC or a CLI, I'm good with that, but we do need to have these folks out there, but there's been a lot of rumors out there of pencil whipping CMEs, that their skills are not actually being done appropriately. So I think we need to take a good hard look at our CME evaluators and maybe pulling the group in a little bit so that we can have a little better oversight over those folks and ensure that people aren't just getting signed off. I have, had thoughts where, we go out and we hold the CME sessions, but quite frankly, we don't have the manpower to do that. I've reached out to a few CICs regarding that, and they're like, sure, I'll do it if you can pay me. I can't. So, unless we have volunteers to do, I don't think it's something that's sustainable because it being, having to go out there and credential all these folks, unless we get volunteer CICs to go out and do it, I can't do it.
I'm going to offer that this conversation has been had at all three of mine, in one form or another, at all my other three REMACs. everybody is facing the same sort of crises because time is money, time is, it's just, it comes down to, and we're moving from an industry that gave a lot of in-kind services to now saying, I've got to make a living and survive, and the economy being what it is, that's the deal. I would tell you in some of the more provocative conversations that have occurred have been discussed fees like New York City does to get REMAC credentialing, where you pay so much a year, and that's what you're doing is you're paying to have the evaluator time and all that stuff. Well, take that and add that on to the lack of reimbursement of how things are going, and there goes another cost on top of the wage. I mean, where do you stop the spiral, okay? I don't know those right answers, okay? One of the other more provocative conversations that's been had, which is interesting, and the folks out of New York City had done this. Do anybody remember the trailer that had the $500,000 mannequin with the videotape and so forth? Well, what they were proposing was we would run that around place to place in the region, and once a year you would go up against the simulator to re-credential. Okay, and they'd say it'd be at Fire Department A, it will be here from 6 to 10. You can schedule, 45-minute blocks to come on in and get your CMEs done. And it sounded good, and frankly, from a consistency point of view and a whole bunch of things, it was a great idea. The problem was it was like $200 a player to do it. And imagine if we say that now. Oh my God, it just gets worse. So I don't know the right answers here. I do know that simulations are the future of CMEs. The trick is how to viably fit that into your system up here.
Look at the changes on the practical skills at the paramedic level.
Well, keep in mind that the other thing, just in case people aren't aware, the National Registry is going to stop doing skills exams here in the foreseeable future, and you're going to a portfolio. Okay? And so, more important than ever is going to become the credentialing at the REMAC level. Because now, I get trained at ABC Paramedic Training Center that's got XYZ bias in their training. It's, if you will, it's like nursing schools. They're no longer standard curriculums. It's educational, what's the word I'm looking for here? Educational, not standards, but concepts. It's no different than everybody in the nursing world. If you come from a community college nursing program, it has a different focus than if you went to a hospital-based nursing school. If you went to a bachelor's program, each of them have different focuses. And we're going to see the ability of our providers to be on the same page in protocols going to be very diverse in the foreseeable future. So this is an issue that's going to really have to think through carefully. And it's going to be key to keeping consistency in your system. So, and that's the realities. I mean, the only other thing I can think of is perhaps there are some grants or foundations that might be willing to underwrite some of the costs to try some of these things.
And so just, those will be some of the things that we'll be looking at. So again, any input is greatly appreciated as we move forward trying to figure out where to go. I would like to start with, the CME semester is ending the end of this month, so certainly not for this time around. But at a very least, we have to look at requesting all our current CME evaluators, which quite frankly, I'm not sure I know all of them right now because of, while I was gone. I have, from the meeting minutes and stuff, and reach out to them and at least have them reapply, fill out the paperwork to reapply, and then we re-credential them for next semester. That's my thought. I don't know. Just to ensure we have a good handle, because we've approved a lot of them, and some of them have been since become suspended. They've, we need to get that process in place to be able to remove them. Again, back to kind of not necessarily a term limit, but to be able to remove them, because we have no mechanism to do that.
At least it'll be the housekeeping, right? Get the housekeeping done, so you know who's who. Those human patient simulation labs are at Upstate and also at Fort Drum. Perhaps the emergency medicine residency program down there would be willing to put your CME evaluators through something for free.
That's a good idea.
Same with Fort Drum. We cater to the population up here. Maybe their commanders there wouldn't mind doing that.
I mean, the other thing, at a minimum, I can go out and, maybe certain agencies, and I can go at least, overview a CME session if they hold them to ensure that these folks are getting, we've had a lot of issues with weakness in skills through our CQI process, so I think that it would behoove us to work on some of our underlying systems to ensure that our providers are getting the best opportunities that they can, learning opportunities to strengthen their skills.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Debbie, you have new business.
Looking through some policies, we were looking at 1103, and it's providing medical direction. In the last paragraph in this policy states, physicians asked to serve as EMS agency medical directors of BLS, ambulance, or first response services shall maintain a ratio of physician to certified providers that is no greater than 500 to 1. An ALS or first response service must maintain a physician to certified provider ratio of no greater than 100 to 1. However, physician may not be the medical director for more than 10 services unless approved by the local REMAC. So I asked Kurt to run a query for me, and Maya has 13 services. Dr. Holland has 9, and so I would like us to make the motion that allows our REMAC doctors to serve more than 10 services so that we're in compliance with 1103.
I'm happy to share the wealth.
Motion made to allow more.
I think the motion to allow more.
The issue we have is we're fortunate in having doctors who want to do it. We're unfortunate in not having enough doctors who are willing to do it. If we follow those standards, we may have agencies that can't get medical directors, which means we now have agencies that can't provide service. So we're going to do our citizens a very great disservice by following this policy. If the medical directors are comfortable with taking that on, then I think it's important that we allow it.
Yeah, and let me remind everybody, that's a policy statement. It is not a regulation.
Correct.
Okay? But it's a guideline, if I may, and that's important. I think it's important to get it on the record to acknowledge and do it from a med-legal point of view and so forth for protection for those physicians who are doing it. However, let me point out, this does not address narcotics. And that one is...
Nobody has more than 100.
Well, I understand, but I'm just saying narcotics is codified. Remember, that is in the code of how many they can have and so forth. That's a whole different story. And you would also anticipate that there were, 6 or 8 or 10 services there that didn't have narcotics? Okay? You start adding that up, and you may be approaching the number of services, not the number of providers, but the number of services that are codified in 80. So you need to think that through too, if I may.
I looked at that, and we're
okay?
Yeah.
Okay, next, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
What was that number, just so I can tuck it in my brain?
11-03, is that which one now?
No,
what the number?
Narcotics, you can't have more than 100 providers underneath you.
Right.
Per agency, though.
No, it's total. Total.
So my big concern was Guilfoyle, but we talked and they weren't anywhere near that, so we figured when we went through it, we were okay. Because that was the concern. You can't have more than 100 total, but there's nobody.
Right, and I believe the and that the 100 total is the math. Yeah. Right. Now, there are places, aka New York City, with New York City FDNY, where we have come up with relationships that create sub-medical directors and so forth to allow that to occur, and that's how that works. And the code speaks to that. Okay, so if we got to a point where you've got to have one that is the medical director and then you have 2 subgroups, you know what I'm trying to say, to finesse that, you could do that, okay?
Quick Question, Deb, when you're talking about ALS, you're talking about 100 ALS providers or total providers? Okay.
100
ALS.
ALS
Yeah.
provider.
Right.
Well, if I may even clarify that further, critical care or paramedic, because
Correct.
AEMTs don't do narcotics. Okay, so let me just,
So,
because that
Okay,
changes
so-
it a little bit too.
So we need
We need a motion, second, or I guess we have a motion on the table.
We have a
The
motion.
question becomes, so the only provider that actually was over the limit was
Dave.
Dr. Gray. And the question becomes, does she really want 13? And I think the answer is no. I mean, if we change that, then she's kind of stuck to that, but if we keep it, because the provision was in there, you said, for approval on a case-by-case basis. And I would say that, being a medical director does involve a lot of work, and does the provider, maybe the prior provider should, or the physician should ask to have more than the 10 agencies.
Well, I think they probably want to rectify it today, so we're.
I know, but I'm just saying we could vote today to make an exception for you, but then it also still gives you the out of, and it keeps others from getting stuck without their buy-in.
But then I don't know, who's going to housekeep? Like, are you going to housekeep that?
This was a query that could...
Yeah, it is part of the deliverables of the program agency
Okay.
to look at that.
Then I think
so
that's a
the
good
housekeep
idea, so
of
then it's a
that.
request in the future.
Yeah, that is how we housekeep it.
So the question is, do you
realize
want
you had 13? Like, did you have that number in the
I
back
actually
here?
think I have more,
So,
unfortunately. Like, if you do, I don't know what counts, like all the,
I say, does that include fire departments?
Well-
right.
No, it doesn't, as an example, it doesn't count as an example. Let's say you've got a fire department that's a pad site.
Right.
That doesn't count.
Right. Good.
It's a fire department that has a BLS agency code doing albuterol, EpiPen, and oh, by the way, you did the pad, that counts.
Right.
So, I mean, or let's say a fire, well, even like you got at a camp that's got EpiPen that you signed, that doesn't count.
That doesn't count, right?
Right.
More of the fire.
So the question then is, do you want to be allowed to have those 13?
No, but that's another day.
Yeah,
I think right
now,
now,
can
I
I
just
put
protect
leave
me?
as is
Yes.
more
Yeah.
at the request of
Right.
a physician?
So, I mean, to make us compliant, then I think we should just take vote, because Maya was the only one that was...
And Dr. Holland's at 9, so I don't know.
So I should amend my motion.
Tell him, you take one more.
No, you take up to 10.
Yeah,
You take one more.
You
It's
take
11.
one more, but after that, it's...
So my motion should be to, upon request of the medical director, allow them to have more than 10.
Because the alternative also is, if an agency is coming requesting for a medical director change, and they approach Dr. Gray, she's already got 13, that would then raise the flag of, oh, maybe some of the rest of us should step up and take over those agencies.
And I think when you guys approve new medical directors, you need to ask the question in the
How many do they already
future
have?
about what this does to the ratios.
Yeah.
That I think is a valid question.
So we have Dave's amended motion.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
The tag team in the corner. The tag team come out of the corner and get it.
You came into EMS and became our medical director.
There was no one back.
So out of from the state council meetings, there was much discussion about the future of critical cares. And it's very easy for docs in New York City who have all paramedics and have an ambulance, umpteen million, and 17 hospitals to draw from to say that this is the standard of care. So I came up with some questions, and Ann is purchasing SurveyMonkey. And so I would like to send this out to all the critical cares in our 3-county region. And then I also have a survey for each agency. I think we need to gather some data so that we have information when this comes up at State Council again in September. So if you can read the questions, the individual ones of how long have you been a critical care technician? Are you actively practicing? How old are you? What agencies do you actively take call? I don't want to know the 30 that you belong to. You know, you're actively taking call with one. Do you plan on pursuing your paramedic? If yes, in what time frame? If no, why aren't you? Are you in the research program? How many calls did you respond to in 2015? And how many calls year to date have you responded to? So those are the questions for the critical cares in the region that I came up with. And then the one for the agencies is below that.
Sure. Whoops.
How many calls does your agency cover? How many ALS calls does your agency have? Oh, how many providers? Paramedic, critical care, AEMTs. How many ALS calls did you respond to in 2015? The total for 16. And if you do not have ALS available, how many miles is your closest ALS? Because they're talking about, well, you know, maybe we'll bump these folks back to AEMTs and they can hook up with a paramedic and yada yada. So I think we need to know, you know, what is the closest ALS mileage?
A thought, if I may, to that second set, you might want to ask a question. What percentage of your calls are covered by a critical care versus paramedic as the highest level of practitioner? Because that will allow you to come up with ratios to see where you are and aren't.
Yeah, you might have 60% of your ALS calls are covered by a CC and 40% of them by paramedics.
Well, I mean,
that's 100.
There are many places in the state where there are a lot of critical cares, but not that many paramedics, or vice versa. You know, a lot of paramedics and very few critical cares.
John, another thing they talked about downstairs, that a lot of the critical care also respiratory therapists are in that particular area that had 500 critical care. So maybe that should be a question, is are those critical care credentialed as an RN or a CT, just to get a feel of what's the caliber of critical care we have out?
Yeah, I can see that. I think, I get why that's there. I don't know that I would muddy the waters here. Statewide, that makes some sense, because the whole reason that was brought up is to discuss the possibility of moving critical cares with allied health backgrounds to paramedic as opposed to continuing critical care. All right. The short answer, well, I was going to do it on my report, but let me just do it here now. We are bringing the paramedic programs to, my office is facilitating bringing the paramedic programs together down in Syracuse. We've been at this about 6 months. We've had 3 meetings. There are a couple of goals and objectives there, and I'll speak to the last one here, which is germane to this point. We're looking at trying to develop a standardized, amongst the 5 paramedic programs in the region, in my 14 counties, a standardized skill process for giving advanced standing for allied health professionals and critical cares to a paramedic program in both written and practical. Now, it is not going to be a 6-unit, 6-module practical exam. Actually, what it'll be, it's going to be a dichotomy of probably about 120 skill sets that will then, in blocks, be tested randomly. In other words, we're going to say, okay, of the 120, we're only going to test these 60. Of these 60, you're going to come in and for trauma division, you're going to do 4. You don't know which 4 you are, but it's going to be one of, you know what I'm trying, each one. So you're random sampling. And then based on how they do in the written challenge and practical, they will look at how to give them advanced standing for paramedic programs. Now, as an example, the new AEMT course, one of the cool things about the new AEMT course is there's nothing in an AEMT course the paramedic student doesn't get, that an AEMT student doesn't get for innovation, as an example, or IV starts and so forth. So now we can finally cleanly take an AEMT student, challenge them through the divisional exams, and then move them up into a full paramedic program. I can't do that with critical care because the original program was 81 hours and 95 it got up, and then the original program, that was total hours, by the way. That was didactic, clinical, everything, 81 hours, by the way. I'm a veteran of one of those deals. I was a veteran of the deal prior to that. But anyway, the point is that that's part of where we're heading. Now, that's germane here because two thoughts. One is it's very expensive to do these in an individual service level, okay, at each individual paramedic program. Thought is we do it like once a year, we schedule it, and it'll probably be a 2-day event, okay, where you're going to go in and do practicals and take writtens, and it'll be over a 2-day event. But we bring everybody together, and then everybody gets the same deal on advanced standing wherever you go. Okay, so it's not like, well, I passed this, let me go shop for the better deal. Everybody's going to have. Now, if you're in a 2-year paramedic program, you'll do it over 2 years. If you're in a 9-month paramedic program, it'll work over 9 months. But you're going to get effectively the same session breaks and pros and cons, because we want to prevent some of the shopping, and it's already happening with programs. Okay, so that's what's going on there. And I'll save the other for my rest of my report. But that's where it's heading, Jim. And I think that's what the Allied Health thing was looking about, to where it's going. I don't know where we're going yet in terms of long term. I don't think the state council does on this issue. That's that fair at this point?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can we have a question on there, what type of service it is, whether it's commercial, paid, volunteer, managed?
Sure.
Could we also add, if there was, for the individual one, if there was a streamlined way to bridge or a paramedic team's way to become a paramedic, would they be interested in doing it?
Okay, yeah.
Or advanced standing, whatever we want to call it.
For critical cares?
Yes.
That's the upper, though, I would think, Mark.
That's what he said.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Oh, the upper, okay, I'm sorry.
Yep.
If I did, I meant to.
Okay.
Anything else? Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah. It's really good.
Any other comments, discussion on this? Deb, do you have any hands?
Nope.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other new business that they'd like to bring forward? John?
Let me just pick up and I'll finish I got 4 things and I'll be quick. The other thing that these paramedic programs are working on currently is standardizing the precepting process, both in training and forms and process, because a lot of services now, well, let's see, I'm approved for Finger Lakes, but I'm not approved for SUNY. I'm approved for Mid-State, but I'm not approved for the Binghamton program, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a standardized training process with a standardized set of forms in terms of working through the process. And I think that will help a lot, because it's daunting sometimes to know, can you or can't you let these people be precepted now when there's one set of process. What the hope will be is there will be a standardized database that will be put up on a web page that will be updated once every 6 months. And you can look, so as a service director, is so-and-so still authorized to be a preceptor? You can go to a web page and find that out immediately, and there's some checks and balances both for students and whatever. And the same idea is it doesn't matter whose program you're originally associated with. Now you can be associated with all of them, and it kind of works out well. So that's kind of where we're working. We've got the preceptor list started, and that's coming. We're now working on the forms. I would hope to have that done by late summer, and then we'll probably look to pilot some in some places, and other places we'll probably kick it in a year from now, but it just takes time to work through this. But we are making some good progress on that. Okay, a couple things. Lee Burns was up and met with Jefferson County Health Department. We met with the director and Charlie and had a really good conversation about the whole use of paramedics and critical cares and basic EMTs in the expanded scope of practice, home health care type arena. And we're working on that. There are some good positive things that are happening from the Jefferson County Public Health Director's side. I have to say that we and I are both really impressed with her commitment to this program and the wanting to make it work in her community, and she sees some really good things happening. So that's really positive, and more to come on that, but I think there's some great things occurring there. Jefferson, Part 18 events. We're in the season, folks. Let me say a couple of things. One, all Part 18 events, and this has been announced at the Emergency Managers Conference and so forth, my office will not issue a Part 18 unless it has an active shooter and an IED protocol.
What are you talking about?
Okay, Part 18, mass gatherings. Like, as an example, we have the fair, we have the French festival, we have, I'm trying to think of some others, but the bigger, if you have 5,000 or more at any one given time, we have to have a permit for a mass gathering. And what I'm basically saying is, now, when I do this, everybody, oh, you know something, is something happening? No, I don't know anything's happening, and frankly, I'm hoping you never have to implement it.
It's the new preparedness.
What?
It's the new preparedness. You gotta be ready
I think, how about this? For most of these events are community-based events that really are not hot targets. But you never know in the day and age we live in of what could happen and not. As an example, the guy with the car who went down the street fair and killed, I've forgotten how many. Okay, that easily could happen at any one of our open events that we permit. So we're looking to do that now.
You said active shooter or not?
IED, improvised explosive devices.
Yeah.
So in other words, the suspicious package, you know what I'm trying to say, the pressure cooker bomb, if you will, the Boston Marathon, you know, that sort of thing. Now, let me be clear about something here. I do not want to see the law enforcement sensitive stuff. If there is an internal, like with Fort Drum or other places that are sensitive, I don't want to know. I frankly, please don't give it to me. All I need is a letter saying that we have a plan, or the lead law enforcement agency, the county EM, or its coordinated plan, and police, fire, and EMS will coordinate accordingly. That's all I'm looking for. Now, some people send me down some really cool plans, and that's very nice, and I'm glad they do that. But I think it's important to think through those things when you're looking at those, so consider that. Last thing. With people going to electronic PCRs, we are finding a number of EDs are not getting them in a timely manner, and we're finding that they are not, they're getting completed sometimes days later in some cases. There are a number of statistics out there, but the number is into the double digits in some places in the state of hours from whence they drop the patient off to when it's completed and sent in. Now, some of that is because people are working 2 and 3 jobs, you know, and they get one late call, and they go to the next job, and they get so there's sometimes they don't finish. Now, the standard is in the policy statement, I might remind everybody, is before they leave their shift, it's got to be complete. Now, that being said, there is also a movement afoot that Joint Commissions is looking at this, folks, and there have been a number of hospitals in the state that have been how shall we say, put on notice that it's unacceptable. And there are now some of the larger EDs down in the Binghamton area that are designating one person. Their total job is to get that chart, okay, because it's become that big an issue. Now, I would also say that you may want to look at some of the other REMACs have created what I'll call minimum data set forms to be left off if you're doing electronic PCRs.
We've done one.
We did that, all right. I would start making QA on compliance of that. Because what we're finding is, guess what? Not doing it, and nobody's checking. And oh, by the way, that form ought to get scanned in and become part of the original documentation. And we, as the Department of Health, have been put on notice that we are to help, and I'm to cajole and use my lovely personality and Mike's lovely personalities to get services to remind to get this stuff done sooner than later. And if services are outliers and aren't being there, I'd like to know about it, and we'll be happy to write letters, go have visitation, do all that good stuff. But we got to get better on this one. It's a serious patient care issue when it's not there.
So as you all know, this has been an ongoing issue for many years. And I just, it goes in spurts and spells, but I just received a notification from a hospital that they're not getting them. I have asked the hospital to they need to identify the agencies to me so I can go to the specific agency, because we have been, you look back at like EMS charts, one of the electronic documentation platforms, I still have a note on the face sheet of EMS charts from 13, stating all of this. We have done general reminder after general reminder after general reminder. It's, I'm sure, taught in all the EMS classes. I know I do in mine. We put it out all the time. We do need to start targeting the specific agencies.
And by the way, it's sometimes it's not the agency as much as one or two provider outliers.
Correct,
Just-
but I mean, that's what I meant, not
but I mean-
necessarily the agency, but the agency directors need to take the responsibility to
make
follow
sure-
up.
Follow up. And I'm going to offer that it may be something you want to QA for a while here to get the emphasis. Because frankly, these hospitals get cited on joint commissions, and it's a big site. It's not a minor site. It's considered, I think it's class 1. I'm doing that off memory, but it's a high level site. You want to be thinking about, you're screwing with their cash flow, folks.
But we also got to make sure it's not a hospital problem, because
Well,
I have
that's the flip
seen
side,
that as
too.
well.
Right, but I will offer in, when I've gone back and sat and gone back, I'm finding that yes, there were fax machine issues, yes, there were some email account issues, but overall, it's just frankly, they're getting sent late.
If anybody has EMS charts, I have a special report. If you don't do your PCR within 2 hours, you have to do a special report that comes to me, and you have to tell me why it wasn't done in 2 hours. And that has cut down drastically the number of late PCRs. There are times you have a second call, and that's what they put under the narrative. I had another call, but
And again,
we chart that every month.
we understand that as a Department of Health, and that's not the case in about 90% of these.
But when they look at it from the commission side, they're going to say this was late. If you don't have the documentation, you're not going to be able to explain why it was late. They had 2 or 3 more calls or whatever. So I'm sure the other electronic PCR reports, you can do the same type thing. You just need to have an emphasis and look at that at the agency level.
I will offer the upfront interfaces of a number of these programs. Things you would think are in there aren't, and with what you can do, I can tell you in 2 of the other programs you can't do, as an example. I spent some time playing this game, and it depends on where you are and depends what you want. And at any rate, please be sensitive to this. That's all I can say, and bring it back. And it's one of those things, as medical directors, you really should be telling your services, paperwork, the job ain't done till the paperwork's there. You can't stress that enough.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other new business or any further discussion?
There's a conflict of interest declaration form here. At least I missed that. We're
Fill it
supposed
out
to
and give
fill
it
it
to
out. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to take just a second before we adjourn to acknowledge Dr. Brown and thank you for your support of emergency medical services in our area. You'll be missed, and Debbie Singleton has developed a certificate of appreciation for you, so thank you for Okay, and unless there is anything else, let's adjourn. We do have CQI, please.